In the late hours of a Tuesday evening in October, a digital message was sent, traveled through servers in a fraction of a second, and arrived on a locked phone screen. It existed for less than 90 seconds before it was remotely deleted by its sender, vanishing into an encrypted void from which it would never be recovered. That fleeting, unseen message would become the central ghost in a machine of justice, a question that haunted investigators long after they believed they knew the answer to what happened to Jenna Wallace. The question of her whereabouts began as a small, quiet worry, a deviation from a pattern so reliable it was taken for granted. 27-year-old Jenna Wallace was a creature of meticulous habit and boundless ambition. Her life was a series of checklists and goals, each one pursued with a cheerful determination that her friends and family found both endearing and inspiring. She was the kind of person who answered texts immediately, who never missed a weekly call to her parents, and whose calendar was a color-coded tapestry of her future. By all accounts, Jenna was on an upward trajectory. She worked as a junior architectural designer at a respected downtown firm, a job she had coveted since her first year of university. Her superiors praised her keen eye for detail and her tireless work ethic, often noting that she was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She did not do this out of obligation, but out of a genuine passion for shaping spaces, for turning blueprints into tangible places where people would live and work. Her personal life was just as structured and full of promise. She was saving aggressively for a down payment on a condominium in the city's burgeoning waterfront district, a dream she was only months away from realizing. Her social life was a warm, tight-knit circle of university friends and a few close colleagues. They described her as the group's planner, the one who organized weekend hikes, birthday dinners, and trips to the art gallery. She was unwaveringly responsible, not just for herself, but for others. When her younger brother was struggling to pay for his university textbooks, Jenna quietly transferred him the money without being asked, telling him only to pay it forward someday. She volunteered once a month at a local animal shelter, finding a simple, profound joy in caring for creatures who could not care for themselves. This was the portrait of Jenna Wallace, painted by those who knew her best, dependable, generous, and relentlessly focused on building a beautiful life. That portrait made her sudden silence all the more alarming. The day she disappeared, a Tuesday, had begun like any other. She had woken up at 6 a.m, gone for her customary 4-mile run along the parkway, and arrived at her office with a coffee and a yogurt parfait by 8. Her colleagues recalled a perfectly normal workday, filled with client calls and revisions to a commercial building proposal. Jenna had exchanged several text messages with her best friend, Chloe Sterling, throughout the day. They discussed a movie they planned to see that weekend and debated what to get another friend for her upcoming birthday. The digital conversation was light, mundane, and utterly ordinary. It was the kind of background chatter that fills the spaces of a close friendship, significant only in its sudden and permanent cessation. At 5:15 in the afternoon, Jenna logged off her computer at work. She spoke briefly with her project manager about a meeting scheduled for the following morning, confirming she would have the updated schematics ready. She then walked to the gym a few blocks from her office, a routine she followed 3 times a week. Security footage from the gym's entrance showed her swiping her keycard at 5:37, wearing athletic leggings and a university sweatshirt. Inside the gym, she followed her usual workout. She spent 30 minutes on the elliptical machine, as evidenced by the machine's usage log, and then moved to the free weights area. Another gym member, who knew her casually, later told police they had exchanged a brief, friendly nod. Nothing seemed out of place. Jenna appeared relaxed and focused, just another person unwinding after a long day at the office. At 6:50 in the evening, gym security cameras captured her leaving through the main exit. She was walking toward the bus stop, presumably to take her usual route home. Her apartment was a 30-minute ride away, a journey she had made thousands of times. Bank records confirmed her bus pass was scanned at 6:58, placing her on the number 7 bus heading northbound. The first thread in the tapestry of her routine to unravel was a planned phone call. Jenna had promised to call her mother, Sandra Wallace, that evening to discuss plans for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. When 9 o'clock came and went with no call, Sandra felt a flicker of annoyance, which soon morphed into a prickle of concern. It was unlike Jenna to forget such a call. Sandra sent her daughter a text message. "Everything okay? Was expecting your call." The message was delivered, but it was never read. An hour later, she tried calling. The call went directly to voicemail, another anomaly. Jenna's phone was a lifeline she never let die. Sandra called her husband, David, and shared her growing unease. He tried to reassure her, suggesting Jenna had probably just fallen asleep early after a long day. Meanwhile, Chloe Sterling was also growing worried. She had sent Jenna a funny meme around 8:30 that evening. Typically, Jenna would have responded within minutes with a laughing emoji or a witty comeback, but the message remained undelivered, not read. Like Sandra, Chloe initially dismissed it, figuring Jenna was busy or tired. By Wednesday morning, the quiet worry had escalated into a full-blown alarm. Jenna did not show up for work. Her project manager tried her cell phone multiple times, each call diverted to voicemail. He then called her apartment building's concierge, who reported that Jenna's car was still in its designated spot in the underground garage, untouched. A call to the firm's human resources department initiated the next step in their emergency protocol, contacting her designated emergency contact, her father, David Wallace. The moment David Wallace received that call, the floor fell out from beneath his world. His daughter, the epitome of reliability, was missing. He immediately called Sandra, and the two parents, separated by 100 miles, but united in their rising panic, began a frantic series of calls to Jenna's friends. Every conversation yielded the same result. No one had seen or heard from Jenna since the previous evening. Chloe, now sick with dread, told them about the unread messages. She also remembered a small detail from their last text exchange on Tuesday afternoon. Jenna had mentioned she was meeting up with someone after the gym to sort out a small financial matter. She had been vague, simply stating it was to collect some money she was owed. At the time, Chloe had thought nothing of it. The Wallaces drove to the city, their minds racing with terrible possibilities. They went directly to Jenna's apartment, hoping to find her sick in bed or evidence of a sudden, unplanned trip. They used the spare key she had given them to let themselves in. The apartment was pristine, silent, and unnervingly normal. Her gym bag was on the floor just inside the door, her work clothes from the previous day neatly folded inside. Her keys were in the small ceramic bowl by the entrance where she always kept them. In the kitchen, a single plate and fork were in the drying rack, suggesting she had eaten a small meal upon returning home. Her bed was made. Nothing was out of place. The only signs of her absence were the things that should have been there, but were not. Her purse, her wallet, and her cell phone were missing. It was as if she had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. After a frantic, fruitless search of the small apartment, David Wallace made the call he had been dreading. He dialed the city's police department to report his daughter missing. The initial police response was procedural, and to the terrified family, frustratingly slow. An officer took a report over the phone, explaining that for an adult with no known medical issues or history of mental illness, a formal investigation would not begin until she had been missing for at least 24 hours. The officer assured them that a patrol car would do a drive-by of her apartment building, but for now, it was a waiting game. That wait was agonizing for Jenna's family and friends. They felt helpless, trapped in a bureaucratic limbo while the trail, whatever it was, grew colder by the minute. They organized their own informal search, calling hospitals and checking with distant relatives. Their efforts turned up nothing. Jenna Wallace had vanished from the face of the earth. The next morning, with the 24-hour mark passed, the case was officially assigned to the Missing Persons Unit. 2 detectives, a veteran named Michael Greer and his younger partner, Sarah Jenkins, were tasked with finding Jenna. They began where the family had left off, at her apartment. They approached the scene not with the panic of loved ones, but with the dispassionate, methodical eye of trained investigators. Their assessment of the apartment mirrored the family's, but they saw it through a different lens. The lack of any sign of a struggle, forced entry, or robbery was significant. It suggested that if something criminal had occurred, Jenna had either left the apartment willingly with her eventual attacker, or the event had happened elsewhere. The tidy state of the apartment offered no immediate clues. The detective's next step was to reconstruct Jenna's life and last known movements with forensic precision. They requested warrants for her phone records, bank accounts, and social media data. They began the painstaking process of interviewing every person who had seen or spoken to her on that final Tuesday. Her colleagues, the gym acquaintance, her family, and her friends were all questioned in detail. From these interviews, a consistent picture of Jenna emerged. A responsible, happy young woman with no known enemies and no risky habits. She did not use drugs, had no gambling debts, and her social circle was small and stable. The narrative of her life contained no obvious seeds of foul play. This lack of a clear motive or conflict was a puzzle in itself. A person like Jenna Wallace did not just disappear. The digital forensics team began its analysis of her electronic life. Her bank records showed her last transaction was the bus fare on Tuesday evening. There had been no activity since. Her social media accounts were silent. Her phone records confirmed the timeline, calls and texts throughout the day, then an abrupt stop around 7:30 in the evening. The phone's last connection to a cell tower placed it in the general vicinity of her neighborhood at that time. Then, at 10:14 that night, the phone pinged a different tower. This tower was located 3 miles north, in a semi-industrial area near a series of warehouses and a little-used railway spur. After that single ping, Jenna's phone went offline permanently, either turned off or destroyed. That northern cell tower ping was the first concrete piece of evidence that suggested Jenna had not disappeared of her own volition. It pointed toward a deviation, a forced or unplanned journey away from her home. As investigators dug deeper into Jenna's life, their attention turned to her romantic history. Chloe Sterling mentioned that Jenna had recently ended a 2-year relationship with a man named Daniel Price. The breakup, according to Chloe, had been difficult. Daniel had not wanted the relationship to end and had reportedly had a hard time accepting Jenna's decision. This information immediately elevated Daniel Price to the status of a person of interest. Detectives Greer and Jenkins arranged to interview him. They met him at his apartment, a cluttered space that stood in stark contrast to Jenna's organized home. Daniel was visibly distressed by the news of Jenna's disappearance, his eyes red-rimmed and his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. He told the detectives that the breakup had been about a month prior. He admitted he had been heartbroken, but insisted it had been amicable. He said he had tried to change her mind, sending her long text messages and calling her a few times in the week after they separated. But he claimed he had eventually accepted her decision and given her space. He said he still loved her and was terrified for her safety. When the detectives asked for his whereabouts on the Tuesday night Jenna went missing, Daniel's story was straightforward. He said he had worked late at his job as a graphic designer, leaving his office around 7. He had then gone to a local bar for a trivia night with a group of his own friends. He named the bar and provided the names of the friends he was with. The alibi seemed solid, but it required verification. Investigators pulled security footage from Daniel's office building, which confirmed he had left at 7:05 in the evening. They then went to the bar. The bartender remembered Daniel and his friends, and several of the other patrons confirmed they had been there for the weekly trivia competition. Daniel's friends all corroborated his story, stating he was with them from roughly 7:30 until well after 11 that night. Despite the corroborated alibi, the detectives remained suspicious. A jilted ex-lover was a classic archetype in cases like this. They wondered if there was a window of opportunity they were missing. The time between Jenna leaving the gym at 6:50 and Daniel's arrival at the bar at 7:30 was tight, but perhaps not impossible. More pressingly, the northern cell tower ping had occurred after 10 o'clock, a time when Daniel was supposedly in the middle of a crowded bar. To be thorough, they secured a warrant for Daniel Price's phone records. The data confirmed his story. His phone had been in the vicinity of his office, and then consistently in the area of the bar for the entire evening. There were no calls or texts exchanged between him and Jenna on the day she disappeared. On the surface, his alibi appeared airtight. However, investigators knew that alibis could be manipulated. They considered the possibility that Daniel could have had an accomplice, or that he had somehow managed to leave the bar unnoticed. They re-interviewed his friends, pressing them on whether Daniel had left the table at any point during the evening. One friend recalled Daniel stepping outside for about 10 to 15 minutes to take a phone call around 9:45. This was a potential crack in his alibi. The timing was close to the 10:14 ping from Jenna's phone in the industrial area. The detectives confronted Daniel with this information. He appeared flustered, at first claiming he did not remember the call, then admitting he had stepped out to speak with his sister. He provided his sister's number, and she confirmed that she had spoken with him at that time about a family matter. The call had lasted 12 minutes. The content of their conversation was mundane. Frustrated, the detectives continued to scrutinize Daniel. They brought him in for a formal, recorded interview at the station. They questioned him for hours, going over his relationship with Jenna, the breakup, and his movements on the night she vanished. Daniel's story never wavered. He expressed his love for Jenna, his sadness over their split, and his profound fear for her well-being. He was emotional, but his answers were consistent. In a search of his car and apartment, forensics teams found nothing to connect him to Jenna's disappearance. There were no signs of a cleanup, no stray hairs or fibers, no traces of bleach or other chemicals. While the emotional turmoil of the breakup provided a potential motive, there was a complete absence of physical evidence linking Daniel Price to the crime. The investigation into him had reached a dead end. With the focus on Daniel fading, investigators returned to the other piece of information Chloe had provided: the small financial matter. She had told them Jenna was supposed to meet someone to collect money she was owed. Detectives pressed Chloe for more details. Had Jenna mentioned a name, a place, a specific amount? Chloe racked her brain, replaying every conversation in her memory. She could not recall a name. Jenna had been uncharacteristically private about it. Chloe only remembered Jenna saying it was a significant amount, and that she would be relieved to have it settled. This loan, whatever it was, had clearly been a source of some stress for the normally unflappable Jenna Wallace. This led investigators down a new path: a forensic audit of Jenna's finances. They meticulously combed through her bank statements, credit card bills, and transaction histories going back several years. They were looking for a large withdrawal or transfer that would correspond to a loan. After days of analysis, they found it: a single wire transfer for $15,000 sent from her savings account 9 months earlier. The recipient of the transfer was not a bank or a corporation. It was an individual, Mark Renshaw. The name was unfamiliar to Jenna's family and to Chloe. The detectives ran a background check. Mark Renshaw was 32 years old, with no criminal record. He worked as a freelance software developer. His address was in a suburb about 5 miles north of the industrial park, where Jenna's phone had last pinged. Suddenly, the investigation had a new, compelling person of interest. Mark Renshaw was now the central focus. The detectives needed to understand his relationship with Jenna. They went back to her circle of friends, this time asking specifically about him. A few of her wider acquaintances recognized the name. Mark was part of a hiking club that Jenna had joined about a year ago. According to members of the club, Mark and Jenna were friendly. They had been on several group hikes together. Mark was described as charismatic and outgoing, but also someone who occasionally came off as a bit too slick, a bit too eager to impress. No one was aware of any romantic involvement between them, nor did anyone know about a $15,000 loan. The transaction had been a private matter between the two of them. The detectives now had a name, a motive, and a geographical connection. Mark Renshaw lived near the location of the final cell tower ping. The motive was financial. $15,000 was a significant sum, more than enough to create a point of deadly conflict. The stage was set for a confrontation. Before approaching Mark, the investigators decided to build a covert case against him. They began by subpoenaing his own financial records and phone data. What they discovered was damning. Mark Renshaw was in serious financial trouble. He had maxed out credit cards, a delinquent car loan, and had recently been threatened with eviction from his apartment for non-payment of rent. He was, in short, desperate for money. His phone records were even more revealing. He and Jenna had exchanged a series of text messages in the days leading up to her disappearance. The conversation was tense. Jenna was asking when he would repay the loan, which was by then several months overdue. Mark's replies were evasive and full of excuses. The final messages, sent on the morning of the day she vanished, were the most critical. Jenna had written, "Mark, we need to settle this. I need that money for my condo deposit. You promised it would be back by this month." Mark had replied, I know, I have it. I swear. Can we meet tonight? I'll have the full amount in cash." They had agreed to meet that evening. The time and location were not specified in the texts, but the arrangement was clear. This was the small financial matter Jenna had mentioned to Chloe. She was going to meet Mark Renshaw to collect the $15,000 he owed her. Investigators now had a timeline and a destination. Jenna had likely gone from the bus stop not to her home, but to meet Mark. It was at this point in the digital investigation that detectives uncovered the ghost in the machine. While reviewing the logs of messages between Jenna and her best friend, Chloe, the forensics unit noticed a bizarre anomaly on the night of the disappearance. At 7:41 in the evening, a message had been sent from Jenna's phone to Chloe's phone. The service provider's logs confirmed its transmission and delivery. However, at 7:42, a mere 68 seconds later, a command was sent from Jenna's device to delete that same message. Modern messaging apps with end-to-end encryption allow for this feature, deleting a message not just from the sender's device, but from the recipient's as well. Chloe had told detectives that she had seen a notification for a message from Jenna pop up on her screen, but when she unlocked her phone to read it, there was nothing there. She had assumed it was a glitch. It was not a glitch. A message had been sent, and then it had been intentionally and swiftly erased before it could be read. The content of that message was gone forever. The encryption that protected users' privacy now acted as an impenetrable shield, hiding a crucial piece of evidence. The provider confirmed to investigators that while they could see the metadata, the time, the sender, the recipient, and the delete command, the actual content of the message was encrypted on the device and never stored on their servers. It was irretrievable. The implications were chilling. Investigators theorized that at 7:41, Jenna, likely in a state of fear or distress, had tried to send a warning to her friend. Perhaps the message said, "Something is wrong," or "I'm with Mark, I'm scared," or even just his address. But before Chloe could see it, the person with her, almost certainly Mark Renshaw, had taken her phone and deleted the message, silencing her final attempt to cry for help. The existence of this phantom message was a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence. It painted a picture of a struggle, a loss of control, and a perpetrator desperately trying to cover his tracks in real time. It was the digital equivalent of a muffled scream. The inability to ever know what it said added a layer of profound frustration to the investigation. It was a truth they could see the shape of, but could never hold in their hands. Armed with the financial motive, the cell tower data, the text message history, and the damning evidence of the deleted message, Detectives Greer and Jenkins finally had enough to confront Mark Renshaw. They obtained a warrant to search his home and vehicle, and another for his arrest. They planned a coordinated operation intending to surprise him and prevent any attempt to destroy further evidence. On a gray morning 3 weeks after Jenna Wallace had vanished, a team of officers descended on Mark Renshaw's suburban apartment complex. They found him at home, sitting at his computer. He appeared shocked and confused as the officers entered his apartment, his calm demeanor quickly evaporating into nervous agitation. While one team took him into custody, another began the methodical search of his property. The search of his apartment yielded immediate results. In a trash can in his kitchen, buried beneath other garbage, forensics teams found a small, empty bottle of industrial-grade bleach. In the trunk of his car, under the spare tire, they found a shovel and a pair of work gloves. The shovel had traces of soil on it, soil that was of a type not commonly found in Mark's suburban neighborhood, but which was consistent with the soil composition in the industrial area to the south. At the station, the interrogation of Mark Renshaw began. He started with a confident, almost arrogant denial. He claimed he knew Jenna only casually from the hiking club. When asked about the $15,000 loan, he first denied its existence. When confronted with the bank records of the wire transfer, he changed his story, claiming it was an investment in a software project he was developing, not a loan. The detectives systematically dismantled his lies. They presented him with the text messages in which he explicitly referred to the money as something he needed to repay. His confident facade began to crack. He became defensive, his answers growing shorter and more hostile. He insisted he had not seen Jenna on the night she disappeared. He claimed he was at home all evening, working on a coding project. This was the lie the detectives had been waiting for. They had already obtained his cell phone records, which told a very different story. While Mark had been smart enough to leave his phone at his apartment, he had made a critical mistake. His smartwatch, which was connected to the cellular network, had been on his wrist. The data from the watch showed him traveling from his apartment complex shortly after 7 in the evening to the industrial park where Jenna's phone had last pinged. It showed him remaining in that area for nearly 2 hours before returning home. When Detective Greer laid out the smartwatch data on the table in front of him, Mark Renshaw fell silent. The color drained from his face. The web of lies he had constructed had been completely unraveled by a device on his own wrist. He stared at the printouts for a long moment, the air in the small interrogation room thick with tension. Still, he refused to confess. He requested a lawyer and the interrogation ended. But the evidence against him was now overwhelming. The motive was clear. He was in financial ruin and could not repay the loan. He had lured Jenna to a secluded area under the pretense of paying her back. The cell tower and smartwatch data placed both victim and suspect in the same remote location at the same time. The deleted message proved that a struggle for control had taken place. The shovel and bleach suggested a violent act and a desperate attempt to conceal it. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and determined they had more than enough evidence to charge Mark Renshaw with the kidnapping and murder of Jenna Wallace. Even without a body, the circumstantial case was exceptionally strong. Mark was formally charged and held without bail. His arrest brought a sense of shock to those who knew him. The charismatic hiker and ambitious developer was now an accused killer. The search for Jenna's remains began in earnest. For weeks, search and rescue teams, assisted by canine units and forensic anthropologists, scoured the sprawling industrial park. The area was vast and difficult to search, a maze of abandoned lots, overgrown fields, and dense thickets of trees. The soil samples from the shovel gave them a general area to focus on, but it was still like looking for a needle in a haystack. As the search continued, the legal case against Mark Renshaw moved forward. His defense attorney argued for his release, citing the lack of a body and the circumstantial nature of the evidence. The judge, however, ruled that the digital evidence, particularly the confluence of the cell phone pings and the smartwatch data, constituted a compelling case for his continued detention. The breakthrough in the search came nearly 2 months after Jenna's disappearance. It came not from the main search area, but from a tip. A man who owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of the industrial park contacted police. He had been reviewing his own security camera footage from months earlier for an unrelated insurance claim when he noticed something odd on the night Jenna had vanished. The footage from a camera pointed at a back alley behind his shop was grainy and dark, but it clearly showed a car matching the description of Mark Renshaw's vehicle pulling into the alley shortly after 10:30 that night. A man got out, opened his trunk, and appeared to drag a large, heavy object wrapped in a tarp into the dense woods that bordered the alley. The man was in the woods for about 45 minutes before he returned to his car and drove away. The shop owner had not thought much of it at the time, assuming it was someone illegally dumping trash. But after hearing about the arrest of Mark Renshaw and the focus of the search in the area, he realized what he might have seen. He immediately called the police hotline. Investigators rushed to the location. The area behind the auto shop was just outside the primary search grid. Guided by the security footage, a specialized team of forensic examiners entered the woods. Within an hour, they found it. In a shallow grave, hidden beneath a pile of brush and fallen leaves, they located the remains of Jenna Wallace. The discovery was a moment of profound sadness and grim vindication. The search was over. The Wallace family's worst fears were confirmed. An autopsy later determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The evidence suggested she had been attacked shortly after arriving to meet Mark, likely in or near his car. He had then used the shovel from his trunk to bury her in the secluded woods, believing she would never be found. Faced with the discovery of the body and the new security camera evidence, Mark Renshaw's legal position became untenable. His attorney advised him that a trial would almost certainly result in a conviction for first-degree murder, which carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecution offered a plea deal. If Mark pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, they would recommend a sentence of 25 years to life. After consulting with his attorney, Mark Renshaw accepted the deal. He appeared in court and formally pleaded guilty. During his allocution, he was required to state in his own words what he had done. In a flat, emotionless voice, he admitted to luring Jenna to the industrial park with the false promise of repaying his debt. He said they had argued, that she had threatened to expose his financial lies to their mutual acquaintances. He claimed he lost control and struck her. He admitted to burying her body and attempting to cover up his crime. His confession was a hollow victory for the Wallace family. It provided answers, but it offered no comfort. They sat in the courtroom and listened as the man who had stolen their daughter's future described her death as an inconvenience that arose from an argument over money. His lack of remorse was palpable. He spoke not of Jenna's life, but only of his own panicked attempts to save himself. At the sentencing hearing, Sandra Wallace was given the opportunity to deliver a victim impact statement. She stood before the court, her voice trembling, but her gaze fixed on Mark Renshaw. She did not speak of hatred or of vengeance. Instead, she spoke about Jenna. She described her daughter's laughter, her ambition, her kindness. She talked about the condominium Jenna would never buy, the family she would never have, the architectural masterpieces she would never design. "You did not just take a life," Sandra said, her words filling the silent courtroom. "You took a future. You took every birthday, every holiday, every moment of joy we were supposed to have with her. You took her from us for $15,000. I hope you spend the rest of your life realizing that you traded a human soul for the price of a used car." The judge sentenced Mark Renshaw to the maximum term allowed under the plea agreement, 25 years to life in prison. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, a man who had extinguished a bright light in the world out of greed and pathetic desperation. Justice, in its legal and procedural form, had been served. But for the investigators who had lived with the case for months, and for the family who would live with it forever, a piece of the puzzle remained missing: the deleted message. Even after his confession, Mark Renshaw refused to say what it had contained. When questioned about it by detectives in a pre-sentencing interview, he had simply shrugged and said he could not remember. It was a lie, another small act of control from a man who had lost all of it. He knew what Jenna's last words had been, and he would take that knowledge to his grave. The investigators were left to speculate. Had she written, "Call the police"? Had she sent his license plate number? Or was it something more personal, a final, desperate plea to her best friend? "Chloe, I'm scared." The technical inability to recover that message became a symbol of the case's lingering pain. In an age of pervasive digital surveillance, where every click and keystroke seems to leave an indelible mark, this one crucial message had slipped through the cracks, protected by an encryption designed for privacy, but co-opted for a sinister purpose. It represented the one question that could never be answered, the final thought of a dying woman that was silenced before it could be heard. The case of Jenna Wallace served as a stark reminder of the dual nature of modern technology. The same digital footprint that had allowed investigators to piece together her last movements, identify her killer, and dismantle his alibi, had also created the void where her final words should have been. The cell tower data, the smartwatch logs, and the bank records had built the cage that trapped Mark Renshaw. But the encrypted, deleted message was the ghost that would forever haunt it. In the years that followed, Jenna's family and friends worked to keep her memory alive. They established a scholarship in her name at her former university, awarded each year to a promising female student in the architecture program. They participated in an annual charity run to raise money for the animal shelter where she had volunteered. They ensured that her legacy would be one of generosity and ambition, not of victimhood. The lead detective, Michael Greer, kept a copy of the case file in his desk long after it was officially closed. On the anniversary of her disappearance each year, he would take it out and read it over. He would always pause on the report from the digital forensics unit, the one that detailed the futile attempts to recover the message from the encrypted ether. It was a professional frustration, but it was also something more. It was a reminder that even when a case is solved, when the perpetrator is behind bars and the legal system has run its course, there can still be an absence of complete resolution. There can be truths that are lost forever, secrets that are kept by the guilty, and words that are never read. The silence left behind by that single, deleted message was in its own way as profound as the silence left by Jenna herself. It was the final, tragic detail in a story of a life taken too soon, a promise unfulfilled, and a question that would echo endlessly in the digital void. The story of Jenna Wallace underscores a modern investigative paradox. The very tools that create unprecedented avenues for solving crimes can also erect impenetrable walls. Her killer was caught because he left a trail of digital breadcrumbs across a network of cell towers and financial servers. His lies were exposed by data he created without a second thought. Yet the most human piece of evidence, a final, desperate communication, was perfectly and permanently erased by the same technology. For Chloe Sterling, the haunting was more personal. She was the intended recipient of that final, vanished message. For the rest of her life, she would be tormented by the what-ifs. What if she had been looking at her phone at that exact moment? Would she have seen the message before it was deleted? Would it have made a difference? Could she have saved her friend? The detectives assured her there was nothing she could have done, that the 68-second window was impossibly small. But logic is a poor comfort for a grieving heart. The notification she had seen and dismissed as a glitch became a source of recurring nightmares. It represented a connection that was severed at the most critical moment imaginable. The knowledge that Jenna had reached out to her in her final moments was both a comfort and a torture. It was proof of their bond, but also a permanent reminder of her own helplessness. She had been the last line of defense, and the line had been cut before the call could get through. Mark Renshaw's life in prison settled into the monotonous routine of incarceration. He never expressed public remorse beyond the coached statement he gave at his plea hearing. He did not participate in prison programs aimed at rehabilitation. He became just another inmate, his past crime a file in a records office. The outside world largely forgot his name, but for the Wallace family, his existence was a constant, painful presence. They attended every one of his parole hearings, starting with the first one after he had served his minimum sentence of 25 years. Each time, they were forced to relive the trauma, to stand before a board of strangers and argue why the man who murdered their daughter should not be allowed to walk free. Each time, they brought a photo of Jenna, a vibrant, smiling image of the woman she was, to remind the board of what was truly lost. The legal system provided accountability, but it could never provide restoration. There was no sentence that could bring Jenna back, no punishment that could fill the void she left behind. Her parents grew old, her brother had a family of his own, and her friends moved on with their lives. But the space that Jenna had occupied remained empty, a perfectly defined absence. The architectural firm where Jenna had worked established an internal award in her honor, the Wallace Prize for Innovative Design, given to a young designer who showed the same spark and dedication she had. It was a fitting tribute, a way to ensure her passion for her craft continued to inspire others. Her desk remained a point of quiet reflection for her former colleagues for years, a reminder of the bright talent that had been so senselessly extinguished. The details of the investigation became a case study in homicide detective training programs. It was used to illustrate the importance of a meticulous digital investigation, showcasing how financial records and location data could build a powerful circumstantial case. But instructors always made a point to highlight the unrecovered message, using it as a lesson in the limitations of their tools and the importance of acknowledging the unknowable elements that can remain even in a solved case. It taught new detectives that their job was not just to find the truth, but to accept the boundaries of the truth they could find. Sometimes, justice is not a complete, perfectly rendered picture, but a mosaic with a missing piece, its shape and color forever a matter of speculation. The missing piece in the Jenna Wallace case was a string of text, a handful of words that likely held the key to her final moments of terror, but which were now and forever lost to time and technology. The story is a somber reflection on the fragility of life and the cold, often pathetic nature of human evil. Mark Renshaw was not a criminal mastermind. He was a man drowning in petty debt and personal failure, and he chose to commit a monstrous act rather than face the humiliation of his own shortcomings. He killed a vibrant, promising young woman, not in a fit of passionate rage, but as a matter of grim financial convenience. It was a crime born of weakness, and its tragedy was magnified by its sheer, pointless banality. Jenna Wallace deserved to see her architectural designs come to life. She deserved to move into her waterfront condominium. She deserved to grow old, surrounded by the family and friends who loved her. Her life was a story that was supposed to have many more chapters. Instead, it ended abruptly on a dark Tuesday night. Her final words captured and then erased by the man who was writing her final, brutal chapter for her. Her memory, however, endured in the hearts of those who loved her, a testament to a life lived with purpose, kindness, and a quiet, unyielding grace. If you found this case compelling, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on similar true crime investigations. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and look out for one another.